Welcome to the underworld of Cleveland in the late 1980s, a time when corruption ran deep and the lawmen and lawbreakers rubbed shoulders in ways you'd only expect in the movies. But what if I told you that in this gritty era, it wasn't just the criminals running casinos, but the FBI itself? Yes, you heard that right. The Federal Bureau of Investigation ran an illegal casino right under the noses of Cleveland's most corrupt cops. This casino wasn't about profits. It was about exposing a network of lawmen turned criminals. In this operation, codenamed Chiron, FBI agents set out not only to catch bad cops in the act, but to reveal a whole system of corruption within Cleveland's police force. We're talking about officers acting as casino bouncers in uniform, no less. And leading the charge, veteran agents Ray Morrow and Dan Estrom, who would go on to bust open one of the biggest police corruption scandals in Ohio's history. So settle in as we dive into The Casino That Caught the Cops, a tale of intrigue, deception, and the true price of justice.
Operation Chiron.
It all began when Dan Estrom arrived in Cleveland and noticed something troubling. Police corruption was rampant, yet no one was doing much about it. The FBI had not investigated police corruption in Cleveland for over a decade, so Estrom had his work cut out for him. His sources hinted at a police department tangled in organized crime, drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and even sports bookmaking. Estrom crafted a bold plan. He would set up 2 undercover casinos, creating an irresistible bait to draw in corrupt officers. But for the ambitious setup, he needed someone special. That's where Ray Morrow came in. Though lacking undercover experience, Morrow was inspired by Joe Pistone, the agent who infiltrated the mafia as Donnie Brasco. Together, Estrom and Morrow prepared to plunge into Cleveland's criminal landscape. And just a side note, if we hit 1 million subscribers, I'll do the Donnie Brasco case. To maintain his cover, Morrow and Estrom set up a t-shirt shop called Simply Tees, which doubled as Morrow's base and a social entry point into Cleveland's bar scene. Similar looking to the shops I have found here on Lorraine Avenue, the shop's unassuming presence allowed Morrow to blend in, gradually earning credibility within Cleveland's underworld. But the undercover casino wouldn't be operational overnight. With Estrom's approval, Morrow tapped into Cleveland's underground gambling network, forming alliances and making connections with key figures, including Bud Branson, a police officer who already ran bookkeeping out of his bar. With Bud's help, Morrow secured the protection he needed for a casino, transforming the empty storefront next to the t-shirt shop into a fully equipped gambling den, complete with craps, blackjack, poker, and slot machines. In Cleveland, organized crime had thrived since Prohibition, with powerful mob figures like Joseph Leonardo and Frank Milano utilizing the immigrants' population thirst for illicit liquor to build a lasting empire. By the 1980s, the mafia's influence had extended to partnerships with law enforcement, who provided protection for gambling operations rather than cracking down. The mafia's alliance with Cleveland police allowed illegal casinos to run unchecked, with uniformed officers on hand as bouncers, ensuring that any raids were avoided. This web of corruption had become a silent agreement, one that Morrow and Estrom's casino would finally reveal. Opening night at the FBI's casino was a blend of real risk and razor-sharp surveillance. Inside, a mix of high rollers and corrupt officers gathered to enjoy the games and the perks. Every table and every transaction was closely monitored, with undercover agents capturing every moment on tape. But gathering evidence wasn't easy. Prosecutors needed more than video of officers standing by during illegal activities. They needed them talking, admitting, taking payouts, and revealing the mechanics of their protection schemes. Morrow had to tread carefully, pressing the officers just enough to get them talking without arousing suspicion. Payments were accepted anywhere from $50 to $1,000 during the course of the undercover operation. The payments were usually in the vicinity of $300 to $400 paid to an individual per activity. Bud, who was being cautious, refused to let Morrow handle the police payouts due to him not trusting him fully and preferring a less traceable system. Morrow sidestepped this by pocketing the cash, prompting Bud to count it on his behalf, then admitting on tape he would be distributing the cash to the officers. In the eyes of the law, this was gold, a clear indication of the officer's role in the casino's illegal operations. Officer Bud's escalating demands for higher payments from Ray were particularly revealing. Bud justified these increased fees by claiming that he and his fellow officers were not merely providing protection for the illicit casino operations, but were also actively gathering intelligence to safeguard the casino. This development was significant for Morrow, as these conversations were recorded, providing great evidence of the officers' involvement in corrupt activities. Let's break down the strategic maneuvering in this FBI operation and define entrapment, because I know there will be questions about it. Entrapment occurs when a law enforcement officer induces a person to commit a crime they would have not otherwise have committed. To avoid this defense, Ray and Dan in this case needed to demonstrate that the officer's illegal activities were already habitual and initiated without external pressure. So they were already committing these acts. By partnering with informants who were embedded and ensuring their actions reflected pre-existing corruption, the operation aimed to sidestep claims of entrapment, making the case airtight. The casino operation required an immense cash flow, sometimes as much as $25,000 weekly, putting immense strain on the FBI's budget. For Morrow and Estrom, the high cost and bureaucratic scrutiny were constant obstacles. When the casino took a hit after several big players hit big, the FBI questioned the operation's worth, but Estrom fought to keep it going. The work was challenging, but the evidence they were gathering was groundbreaking. Cleveland was a city rampant with significant challenges. The once thriving industrial city had seen its manufacturing base disappear, leading to economic decline and a shrinking population. The steel mills and factories that had powered the city's growth were closing or relocating, leaving behind unemployment and urban decay. Public services, including the police department, were underfunded and overstretched, contributing to rising crime rates and a sense of lawlessness in certain neighborhoods. This environment of economic hardship and social unrest created roots for corruption within the police force, as officers faced the temptations of bribery and illicit activities amid the city's struggles. So, why is police corruption so devastating for a city? When you think about it, law enforcement is supposed to be the backbone of any community, right? They're there to serve and protect, to uphold the rule of law. And for regular people, this means that they can't rely on the very institution that's supposed to protect them. Trust in the police plummets, and instead of feeling safe, the public feels vulnerable, almost as if they're living on a place where the rules don't apply equally. And you can't be really sure who's looking out for you. It's destabilizing and can scar a city for generations. So in that case, the budget was well worth lifting the rock of corruption in Cleveland. Living alone in a small apartment, he watched his family life unravel as the operation took him further from his wife and children. He took many precautions, even had a backup plan in case his cover were to potentially be blown when he was with his family. For example, one instance was during one of his visits with his children at a Giant Eagle in Youngstown, Ohio. He spotted a bartender from a bar he regularly went to. He dropped a box of cookies and ran from his family, hoping to not get his cover blown. Eventually, Morrow's wife moved to Pittsburgh, a painful decision that highlighted the sacrifice he was making in pursuit of justice. Estrom, too, had made similar sacrifices throughout his career, but Morrow's decline was deeply felt. After months of relentless work, Morrow's emotional health began to suffer. A psychological evaluation highlighted his deteriorating mental state and was advised to take a break and reconnect with his family. When Ray returned, he realized the one operational casino was just not enough. Business was good, too good in fact. They needed more space, so they moved the operation to a massive warehouse. It looked similar to the one in this shot, on Cleveland's east side, where patrons could actually drive into the building to avoid detection. Inside, the FBI rigged the place with state-of-the-art surveillance. Every shady handshake, every whispered promise, every bribe exchange was recorded. What started as a low-key investigation quickly turned into a gold mine of incriminating evidence against dozens of police officers. One night, one of the officers, Bud, tipped off Ray that a raid was planned on their casino. Bud wasn't just giving them a heads up, he was actively protecting an illegal operation. This was a huge turning point, solidifying the scope of police corruption. And yet, the stakes only got higher. Bud was suspicious of Ray and even asked him if he had told anyone that the raid was taking place, brandishing a gun while doing so. There were a few occasions where Ray was almost caught with a recorder. The first was when meeting associates at a bar. He had to change his tape on the way there. When he arrived, the recorder wire was protruding from his zipper on his pants, so thinking quickly, he grabbed his crotch area and excused himself to go to the restroom to fix the recorder's position. Similar to the bar behind me, Walt's Cafe was the spot for many exchanges and meetups between Ray and Bud, where they would make further plans for the casino. This wasn't the only place they would meet. They would bar hop many bars in the city of Cleveland, whether it be on the west side or east side, having discussions with high-stakes gamblers, hoping they would attend the casino to make it a popular scene. Another time was when Bud even confronted Ray, arranging a tense, no wires allowed meeting to test if Ray was actually an FBI agent. Imagine that moment, Ray alone faced with a room full of corrupt cops and criminals, knowing that one wrong word would blow his cover and endanger his life. But Ray played it cool, and by the end of the night, he convinced Bud that he was no FBI mole. The operation escalated further. The FBI wanted to see if the officers would protect a drug shipment, so they orchestrated a fake deal with marijuana on the line. To some, this may seem extreme. After all, it meant putting actual drugs in play, but it was essential to the case. So, with the potential play with narcotics, the corrupt officers needed to make connections with Cleveland's judicial system. Through Ray's connections, they discovered judges who were willing to look the other way for the right price, offering to smooth over any legal hiccups in Ray's so-called drug operation. The rot had spread far beyond just the officers on the street, so they arranged a meeting in the Cuyahoga Municipal Courthouse. Yeah, you heard that right. In this courthouse to discuss the details of the protection of the drug and casino deals. It was on these very steps where Ray was prepared to meet with a judge, and it suddenly hit him. The magnometer would pick up the recorder he had hidden in his pants, blowing his cover entirely. He tried to back out, telling Bud he didn't want to go through with meeting the judge, using the excuse that the drug dealing was a step too far for him. But in the end, they managed to sidestep the whole thing, and Bud had connections with the officers at the courthouse check-in, and they got waved through without even passing the magnometers. When the FBI finally moved in, they didn't just storm in, guns blazing. They planned every step, even coordinating with Cleveland's internal affairs to make sure the officers would be unarmed. 30 police officers, most in uniform, were arrested without major incident. Among those arrested, a two-time Cleveland Police Officer of the Year. At first, he claimed entrapment, but faced with the FBI's video evidence, just like so many others, he pled guilty. It was one of the largest busts of police corruption in American history, and it wasn't without its unusual events. One officer claimed he was too drunk to understand what was going on. Imagine that defense. I was too hammered to know I was taking bribes. 30 Cleveland police officers and 17 additional individuals were indicted. Those indicted face fines ranging from $250,000 to $2 million and prison sentences of up to 40 years. Handling evidence on this scale was a huge task, with hours upon hours of footage and testimony. Dan Estrom and his team set up a specialized system to catalog everything, because each officer charged had to receive a full record of evidence against them. The level of documentation and detail allowed the FBI to move forward with charges immediately, streamlining one of the largest corruption cases ever undertaken. During the investigation, Ray Morrow recorded over 1,000 body audio recordings and 500 telephone and videotape recordings. Ray and Dan's reflections reveal just how taxing an undercover operation like this can be. When you spend years undercover, forging relationships with people you're ultimately going to arrest, the emotional toll can be intense. Ray even mentions how he was asked to give away a club owner at her wedding, a woman who had no idea he was undercover. This wasn't just work, it was personal. Ray and Dan ultimately viewed their work as essential. This wasn't a job local internal affairs could handle. Corruption was too entrenched. The FBI's national oversight was crucial to the operation's success, and the case remains a testament to the role federal agents play in maintaining the integrity of law enforcement. Cleveland. Often overlooked on the national stage, this city's police corruption scandal of the late 90s should have been headline news. It had all the makings of a blockbuster story. FBI sting operations, law enforcement officials turned traitors, and public trust shattered. But why, then, did it barely leave a mark in the national scare? First, consider the backdrop. Cleveland, a city already known for high crime rates and economic struggles, may have suffered from what you could call scandal fatigue. Stories of corruption, unfortunately, were not exactly breaking news for a city battling systemic issues for decades. Add to this the fact that Cleveland isn't typically seen as a media capital like New York or Los Angeles. Major scandals from those areas tend to hit harder and linger longer in the public mind. All right, so here's my take on this. I really believe this case could have gone much further. You had Ray Morrow, who had been at the grindstone day and night, facing endless pressure from the FBI to bring this operation to a close and pressure from his family to come home. You can imagine how that kind of pressure might influence someone. There comes a point where you're just exhausted, and focus shifts from uncovering the full story to simply getting a conviction. It had to end with something that looked like a win and not a loss. There was a web of corruption here, one that may have gone deeper and involved even more players. I believe we got a glimpse of it. There's a sense that a lot of the real story might still be out there, buried under layers of secrecy and fatigue-driven decisions. Now, as a Cleveland native myself, I was really hoping to track down the exact locations of those secret FBI-run casinos that played a key role in the city's infamous 90s police scandal. Unfortunately, these locations have not been publicly disclosed by the FBI due to operational security and the nature of the sting operation. There were street names made public, but the context clues for the exact locations were tailored to be very general. Now, going forward, as I cover crimes and scandals from other parts of the country, my goal is to actually visit the real locations whenever possible, like Ray Morrow's actual apartment building during the investigation that you can see behind me, Victoria Plaza. There's something grounding about being there in person, seeing the setting, standing where people stood back then. It solidifies the reality of these events and reminds us that these stories weren't just headlines or legends. They involved real people, real lives, even if they happened before our time. If you want to learn more about the case, I recommend you read Broken Shield, the true testimony from Ray Morrow himself. So, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more history. Thanks.